Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today upgrading my ice minion Necromancer for you. And with this build we're going to be doing a bunch of cold damage with our minions. We're also going to set it up differently. We'll no longer be using Lich's Scorn. Instead we'll go with the two-handed staff, so you don't have to worry about Infernal Shades and Dread Shade. Dread Shade will simply just be cast for the minion attack speed and damage. You don't have to worry about consuming all those Infernal Shades to give them flat damage, and instead we'll be buffing our minions with Chaos Bolt, which has a couple of nodes that work well with minions. However, both of them are not working as intended at the moment, so the damage of this build will actually skyrocket when those nodes get fixed. And those are the Revolution node up in the top right is supposed to give your minions flat spell damage based on your maximum mana every time that you consume extra mana to cast Chaos Bolts. However, I've tested it, and even making it proc multiple times, my minions' damage doesn't go up at all, so it's definitely not giving them the flat spell damage that it should be. And then the other one is called the Gate, which gives your minions the ailment chance when you hit them with Chaos Bolts. It gives them the ailment chance inside of Chaos Bolts. Now, while it does hit the minions, giving them the Frostbite chance inside of the Chaos Bolt skill tree, it doesn't actually hit your minions, because the idea behind this was we would run the normal ice minions, and then we would have the retaliation of Bone Nova Golem, which would be getting flat spell damage every time that we procced the Chaos Bolts, and then we'd be hitting him with Chaos Bolts, having him retaliate. However, he does not retaliate because Chaos Bolts, even though it's hitting your minions, doesn't actually hit them. So I believe that both of those nodes, even though they're written that way, are just not working fully as they intended are. So if they get to work fully intended, this build will take off even faster, because it will be a combination of the Retaliation Golem with the ice cold minion army that we have, and putting both of them together obviously would make it much stronger. On top of that, being able to scale up their spell damage just based on Chaos Bolts going off makes it absolutely ridiculous. But again, it's still good perfectly as is. Even without it, you're still going to do plenty of damage, apply plenty of frostbites. Your minions have good survivability, and in the gameplay we're at 200 plus corruption, which is higher than the old 300 corruption, so they're doing quite well. But with that, let's go ahead and get into the skills, the passives, and just exactly how this build works. For skills, we're running Chaos Bolts, Summon Bone Golem, Dread Shade, Summon Skeleton, and Summon Skeleton Mage. The minions have +1 skill level due to the staff giving all minion skills +1 level. For Chaos Bolts, we're using this because 1, it's a new skill that we now have access to, and 2, it should be buffing our minions tremendously. However, again, as I stated in the intro, there's a couple of nodes that aren't working quite as intended, and we'll go over that. So first off, we want to go to the right side. We have 3 points in Abrupt Chaos, 3 points in Pandemonium, 1 point in Chthonic Aurora, 3 points in Mana Anarchy, and 1 point in Revolution. Now here's the thing, is every time that you proc the Mana Anarchy, which we should have a 39% chance every time that we cast Chaos Bolts to consume the extra mana, which has Chaos Bolts do more damage, but we don't even care about that. We just want to proc that. So every time that mana consumption is procced, with Revolution, your minions should gain flat spell damage, 1 flat spell damage for every 20 max mana you have. I have 360 mana on this build, which means they should be getting 18 flat spell damage. It doesn't say anything about this only having 1 stack either, although I'm assuming it probably does only have 1 stack, but even if it is 1 stack, against the training dummy, I noticed absolutely no difference in damage that minions were doing, spamming Chaos Bolts and having it proc multiple times. So I believe you're not actually getting that right now. So once you do get that, you should get a big boost of damage, especially with your mages and your Bone Golem with his Retaliation Bone Nova. On the other side, we are also speccing in with 5 points in Mania and Flames, 1 point in Call Mordidas, 1 point in Chance of Snow, 1 point in A Grave for 2, and then down here, the Gate. This gives the ailment chance of Chaos Bolts to your minions on hit, and it specifically says hitting your minions with Chaos Bolts grants them any of the damned Ignite, Bleed, or Frostbite chance in Chaos Bolts. In this case, Ignite's converted to Frostbite for us, which is going to give them 100% chance to Frostbite on hit, which is nice, and that does work. So when you hit your minions with Chaos Bolts, it does give them that. The bad thing, you're not actually hitting your minions, so it does no damage to them, and that also means that in Summon Bone Golem, the retaliation node does not work for you actually hitting them. Hopefully that gets fixed and you actually hit your minions, and that way you can give your Bone Golem a flat spell damage through the Revolution node, and you can actually hit him through the Gate, and therefore he can retaliate on top of giving all of that flat spell damage. It would be a great synergy, but again, neither of those seem to be fully working as intended at the moment. But again, the build still works perfectly fine. It's still the Ice Army, and it's still very powerful in the end game. The Summon Bone Golem we built into Retaliation as well as Cold, so we got 5 points in Amalgam of Mages, 5 points in Bone Hail, 1 point in Betrayal, 1 point in Amalgam of Primalist, 3 points in Cold Vengeance, 1 point in Death Chill Golem to make him cold, and 1 point in the Breath of Forcimos. And this also gives him a cold skill, which is really nice, and when he uses that, that also scales with a base spell damage for minions, so he gets a little bit of that. It also gets flat spell damage based on your vitality. Of course, it also gets it from our staff, which has minion spell damage on it, and it should get it from the Revolution in the Chaos Bolts once it's working. And then we have 2 points in Amalgam of Sentinels and 2 points in Bladed Fist. For Dreadshade, we're just using this to increase the damage and attack speed of the minions. We got 2 points in Spectral Presence, 1 point in Lone Watcher, 3 points in 𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐴𝐻𝐿 for that attack speed form, 4 points in Grim of Fate for that increased area, so it affects all of your minions at once, and then of course gives them damage, 2 points in Duskheart to give them some damned on hit chance, 1 point in Blind Fairy so the Dreadshade that's actually on the minion will have additional cast and attack speed, 4 points in Lingering Doom to give them flat necrotic damage, and then 3 points in Flesh Harvest so that all those buffs are boosted by the amount of missing health that the Dreadshade is on. So as the minion's health goes down, their buffs go up for everyone in that aura. And then for Summon Skeleton, we have this set up to have as many skeletons as possible, and then to make them fire the cold projectiles. So we got 4 points in Unbound Necromancy, 1 point in Gravewalkers, 1 point in Sweeping Strikes, 5 points in Necrotic Conviction, 1 point in Hollow Walkers, 3 points in Unholy Rage, 1 point in Marrow Walkers, 1 point in Lone Guardian, 1 point in Mightier Than Sword to get rid of the warriors altogether, so we only have the archers, 1 point in Fire Arrow, then converted to Cold with 1 point in Ice Arrow, and then the 1 point in Multi-Shot gives them extra arrows. It does increase the cooldown from 6 seconds to 7 seconds, and then gives them 8% more damage, which is perfectly fine. And then for the mages, again, we're setting these up as the cold mages with as much damage as possible. With 5 points in Stellar Mortis to give them that base crit chance and 3 points in Grey Merchant, they should almost never die because they're healing such a good portion of their health on every crit they do, and they do have 100% crit in this build. We then have 1 point in Order of Death, 4 points in Splinter Dominion for extra projectiles, 1 point in Argonatic Speed for the extra cast speed form, 5 points in Gravetide, 1 point in Cryomancers, and then 1 point in Frostlich. Get rid of all the other mages so you only have the Cryomancers. For passives, we got 20 points in the base Acolyte with 7 points in Forbidden Knowledge, 5 points in Dark Rituals, and 8 points in Stolen Vitality. We then have 5 points in Warlock to unlock the Chaos Bolts with those 5 points in Soul Eater for the mana regen, and then 85 points in the Necromancer, which is our mastered class, with 8 points in Risen Army, 3 points in Cursed Blood, 1 point in Blood Armor, 5 points in Mortal Tether, 1 point in Unbound Necromancy for that extra skeleton, 7 points in Aegis Fall for all that minion armor shred, 5 points in Frantic Summons, 5 points in River of Bones, which is where your minions are going to get a ton of critical strike chance as well as leech a lot of that critical strike damage. This is what will keep them alive. 10 points in Hearsay, 10 points in Blades of Forlorn, 10 points in Rite of Undeath, 1 point in Disciples of Necromancy for your 5th mage, 10 points in Moonlight Prior since we are doing a lot of damage. You don't need this, but it just adds flat damage for them. You're free to put these 10 points anywhere else that you want. 8 points in Tyrant for that increased health for us, and then 1 point in Tyrant's Legion for that extra 1 skeleton. And then for the character sheet, again, on this build, you want to get your resistances capped. I'm still missing some of mine, but that's because we're mostly focused on minion stats. We have a little bit of armor that will go up inside of Dreadshade if you put a point in there to get extra armor per vitality, which I didn't, but you can definitely do that instead of giving the minions damn chance. And then for defense, we do have that 100% critical strike avoidance, but again, we are a low life build, so the only thing that we care about is stacking as much health as possible and getting some extra int into the build for that ward retention. And then for gear, the main things that you really want in this, if you're going low life, you want 𝐬𝐭𝐴𝐬𝐬, and then you also want your Last Steps of the Living. Again, having hybrid health on this, int, vitality, or extra move speed are going to be the main things that you want. For the chests, getting health, vitality. You can also get minion critical strike chance and minion skeleton and skeleton mage's flat base critical strike chance, which is something I would want to roll on this as well. Int is also very helpful, but on the weapon, the main things that you want is getting a ton of flat mana and mana regen. You can get over 200 mana just on the weapon. This is the only spot I have mana on this build. I would have put mana in other spots, but again, that node wasn't working properly and it wasn't giving us the flat spell damage, so I'm not going to build any more of that gear. until I get it or look for it. And then here you also have the 2 big minion stats. You get flat minion spell with bow damage, which affects both your mages and your archers, and then you have the minion melee spell, which affects your mages and your golems. So a big boost to them there. Again, you could get tier 6, tier 7 of the minion spell damages instead of the mana, especially in this build. That would probably do you better until they fix the node, but this works really well. On the helm, you can definitely get minion critical strike chance. You can also get base crit for them here. The death rattle is not mandatory, but since they are doing a lot of critical strikes, that crit multi for them is really nice. On idols, you can get the base crit chance for skeletons and skeleton mages. This is kind of like hit and miss. If you have it on helm or on chest, you don't really need the idols, and you can run as much health as possible. For us, we're running all of this hybrid health idols just to get as much health for our survivability as possible. And then for blessings, the blessings that you want are going to be ones that increase your armor, your increased armor, all resist, and then if you want increased minion damage as well. But that's really the only blessings you're going to be looking for. Summon all the minions, and then they just attack for you. That's literally it. Just make sure that they have a Dread Shade up, so throw one of those on them so it's going. And then the way that it should work when it's fixed, when you hit them with Chaos Bolts, that should give them all the Frostbite. So you can see they're applying tons of Frostbite to the training dummy now. We're at 50 plus stacks. And the other thing that should be happening is if you're hitting your Golem with that, he should be retaliating with Bone Nova, but again, it doesn't seem to actually be doing a hit. It's just giving them that buff. And then of course, you can see that when I hit them with Chaos Bolts and we're proccing all of that mana consumption, their damage isn't actually going up, which it should be. They should be getting all that flat spell damage. Hopefully once that gets fixed, they should easily be doubling the amount. If you get 5 or 6 procs of that, that's more spell damage than they already have, which should double the damage. But again, this is definitely good for 200 to 300 corruption, and I haven't had any issues with their survivability. Occasionally, a Rhaegar skeleton will die, but the skeleton mages and the bone golem have yet to die in 200 plus corruption, unless you let them just stand in a dot, which you just kind of want to keep them moving. But that's going to be it for this guide. I hope you guys like the update for it. Again, you can play the old version with Lich's Scorn if you want. This one's just way simpler. You just go around and just Chaos Bolt things and put up a Dread Shade instead of constantly having to refresh the Infernal Shades. So it just seems like it synergized and just did better. But that's going to be it for this guide. Hope you guys liked it. As always, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.